Honorable Patriots, I wish to discuss with you a topic of severe national importance, and that is the foreign gentrifiers' assault on urban Canadian renters and potential homeowners. Now, what do I mean by gentrifier? Well, first of all, we have to understand what gentrification means. Gentrification, in a rough definition, is when a community is reorganized to suit the needs of new residents, most likely wealthier residents. So, foreign gentrification would basically be the reorganization, and when I say the assault on urban Canadians, would be the reorganization of urban Canada to suit the needs of wealthier foreigners. That's what I mean by that. Now, let's see some examples of that. Number one, some examples would be the amount of mosques and temples and synagogues and all these different things that keep being built in our urban areas. That's one small example. Well, not a small, that's a big example, but that's one example that most people could identify with. But other examples that others may not identify with would be the amount of luxury condominiums that these foreign monopoly capitalists continue to build in our downtown areas that are completely ugly, disgusting. They've completely destroyed the skyline of the city of Toronto. And I think it's being done deliberately because, as I've said before, this is an invasion by non-Western forces, and you can't invade a place when it doesn't look like the area that you come from. So these foreign monopoly capitalists build these condos that look like something out of Hong Kong or Tokyo or Dubai or something like that. And that's what Toronto looks like now. The neoclassical architecture of Toronto is completely destroyed. But also the fact that many wealthy foreigners continue to buy 2, 3, 4, 5 different houses to speculate on the housing market with no intention of living there, but they buy them up, and as a result, Canadian renters and Canadian homeowners are forced to compete with foreign monopoly capital. Because they are in our housing market, they don't want to live in the housing in the houses. But we who want to live in a house have the Canadian dream or own property that's being taken from us because we have to compete with the foreign monopoly capital of many different lands, whether it be the Chinese or the Americans or the Jews or the Indians or the Arabs, buying up all our houses, not to live in them, but to get rich off of them, while we are forced to live in these tiny little dolly houses that are built on top of each other, which cost more than $500,000. And it's like we have very little land, very little privacy, very little freedom. That's what we're having to live with. It's completely unacceptable. We cannot tolerate this anymore. What is this now? It's like we Canadians. First of all, it's bad enough that many of us, more and more of us, especially the newer generation, are increasingly out of the home owning market. We are slowly beginning to realize that owning property, which is something that says something about your status, it says you are free, it means you're powerful, it means you're independent. That dream is being taken from us. Instead, we're being encouraged to rent. We're being encouraged to live off of someone else. Even in the media, the politicians, they're all telling us to rent. It's a part of the Agenda 21. It's a part of the new, we have to rent, live off of someone else, live in someone else's property, share with other people. It's socialism on a massive scale. This is what we have to live with. And even if we do own a property, again, look at our neighborhoods. Look at them. Look at these neighborhoods. Look at these houses built on top of each other. This is what it looks like in the greater Toronto area. I'm telling you. And we're having to pay our arm and a leg to live in doll houses. This can't be acceptable. So the solution to this, honorable patriots, is, first of all, we need to stop the gentrification, the foreign gentrification. And I don't mean that we should get rid of foreigners. I'm not saying that. You know I'm not a racist. I'm not. I've always said, hey, if I was the leader of this nation, you know what would happen to racists? First of all, racists, rapists, child pedophiles, they would be classified as undesirables. Then they would be shipped off to labor camps where they would have to work making bricks, making soil, making gravel to ship to us to build our infrastructure. There would be no tolerance for that whatsoever. I know someone out there is going to say, "Oh, racism is free." No, not in my nation, not in my Canada. It wouldn't be tolerated. You'd be sent to a labor camp. That's what would happen to you. But what I am saying is that we cannot have this country be the playground of wealthy foreigners. We can't have that. We have to stop the building of these condos owned by foreigners. Because I'll tell you, most of those condos in Toronto are made by foreigners. I'm telling you that. Make no mistake about it. Make no mistake about it. Most of them are owned by the foreigners. So we stop that. First of all, we should stop the building of luxury condos. Put a moratorium on it. Because luxury condos are not for people with modest incomes. And a lot of people with modest incomes are finding it hard to find a place. Because more people are building luxury condos, they're converting apartments into condos, and people with low to modest incomes are having a hard time finding places. And when there's a lessening of supply and an increase of demand, the price goes up. So we need to stop the building of these luxury condos and start building apartments, and build the apartments that are neoclassical in structure, Beaux-Arts in structure, not a modern concrete social housing blocks of the 50s and 60s. Stop that foolishness. Immediately, we have to stop that foolishness. Build apartments for people to live in that look decent, that look neoclassical, that look Western. That's number one. Luxury apartments, we don't need any more of that. If you're a wealthy person, you can go live in Rosedale. You can go live in Bridle Path. You have enough condos as is. We're not going to cater to you anymore. And most of the people that live in those condos are usually foreigners anyway, so we're not catering to them anymore. Number two, we need to stop this thing where people are using our real estate market to speculate. So stop foreigners, just like in New Zealand, stop foreigners who don't live in our country from owning property. If you don't live in Toronto, you shouldn't be able to have property in Toronto. You need to have property to live. That's what property is made for, not to speculate and get rich. Because then we are forced to compete with you, with foreign monopoly capital. So foreign monopoly capital buys up all the houses. There's a lessening of demand of supply of the houses. Then the houses become expensive and more expensive. And then what happens when houses are expensive? Then rent becomes expensive. When land is expensive and the people buy land and they build apartments and stuff, then it becomes expensive. So we need to stop that. Stop foreign monopoly capital from taking our property and things like that. And finally, and this is very controversial, but I think it's necessary. I think that communities, honorable patriots, have to decide whether or not they feel that these mosques and these temples and these synagogues, these massive eyesores in their communities should be built or not. If a community says no, they should have the right to not have it there. Because I'll tell you, those temples, those things, those are for rich people. Those are for rich Muslims or rich Sikhs or rich Buddhists. It's not for poor. First of all, you can't be, that's just how it is. And it's an architectural nightmare. I mean, you go to any suburb and stuff like that, that's what you see time after time after time. It's unacceptable. It's unacceptable, and it also drives up the price of the neighborhood as well. I would say so, because when you have these luxury temples and these luxury mosques and things for the wealthy foreign monopoly capital owners to go and worship, that's gentrification. That is it. So we have to decide whether or not we want them. I would say even churches too. I would say churches as well. The community has to decide whether or not these religious structures get built or not. Because religious structures are designed in such a way that could either complement or radically alter the look of a community, and it shouldn't be allowed. So those are the suggestions that I have come up with to assist the Canadian homeowner and the Canadian renter with having that ability to have property of his own on when he has a modest income. This is the Arana Nation.